Hello, this is Paul Chek. Welcome back to my video blog. Today I thought I would talk about monitoring your body fluids for health. As often, I refer you back to my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, as your basic self-help operator's manual, so you can learn how to eat, move, and be healthy. And then, of course, there's a lot of extra information in my audio workbook program called You Are What You Eat, which was about 130 something pages I had to cut out of How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy to keep the length of it about the size that the average reader can handle. But that's very, very important information that I highly recommend that goes beyond what's in the book. And then there's many other of my resources, such as eating the Chek way or primal pattern dieting. Feel free to look at the website, the 1, 2, 3, 4 for overcoming addiction, obesity, and disease. Today I'm just going to give you a brief overview of some simple tips that you can use to monitor your body fluids to give you indications as to where you may be out of balance or to celebrate where you are in balance. So let's start with sweat and hydration. There's many things you can learn from your sweat. When I used to train the United States Army boxing team, we had to weigh the athletes 2, sometimes 3 times a day, and I was very able to learn a lot of things by not only the smell of the athlete, but by watching their body weight changes, the smell of the athlete, knowing what kind of diet they're on, knowing their exercise programs since I designed them, and related diet and lifestyle factors such as mental, emotional stressors. I was able to observe a lot of changes, and I can tell you there's many things that will affect the smell of your sweat and your urine, for example. One of them is stress. So when you look at sweat, the first question, anytime there's any imbalance in your sweat, as I will show, question number 1 is, am I hydrated? And 2, if I'm drinking what seems to be adequate amounts of water. In my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, I recommend drinking half your body weight in ounces of water daily as a general norm. So if you're a 200-pound man, on average, you're going to need 100 ounces of water a day. If you're in a metric country, take your body weight in kilograms, multiply it by 0.033, and that gives you the amount of liters a day you should drink relative to body weight. Now, you can have the right amount of water coming into you, but if the pH of the water is off, for example, if the water is too acidic, it can then cause disruptions in sweat, in urination frequency, etc. So, if the water is not adequate in mineral content, it will disrupt urinary function by causing you to pee too frequently, and that can disrupt mineral balance in the body and often leads to fatigue. So there's just a couple of tips right out of the box. In order to determine if you're optimally hydrated, a very simple test you can do is the pinch test. Pinch the skin on the back of your wrist, let it go, and it should return to completely normal within less than 1 second. So when I pinch my skin, it returns to normal in less than 1 second, which means I'm adequately hydrated. I've seen patients whose skin I've pinched on the wrist, and 4, 5, 6 seconds later, it still looks very pinched up and very slowly comes down, which would indicate quite a high level of dehydration. Angie Lustrick, if you go to angiesworld.com and her blog, she's got a little video in there on how to assess the pH of your water using pH strips, and she explains some of the dangers of overfiltration through reverse osmosis and how that can actually acidify your water and demineralize your water. So you may want to look at angiesworld.com in her blog section. Many of the Chek practitioners have great blogs, and if you go to the chekinstitute.com, we have some excellent blogs in there for you as well, in case you get bored with mine. Okay, so what are we looking at with sweat? 1, the smell of the sweat. If a person's healthy, their sweat should not smell. If you smell your own armpits, it should not smell foul. It shouldn't smell concentrated. It shouldn't smell acidic, stale, pungent, nasty. When you walk into in a gym locker room, you smell the rich, nasty smell of unhealthy sweat. But your sweat should not smell like that. Your sweat should just smell like your body would be an analogy, but not off-putting. If someone else was to smell your clothes after you sweat in them, it shouldn't smell foul to them. It should just smell like clothes that have been exercised in, but not off-putting at all. As a matter of fact, I like the smell of my sweat. I love wearing my rock lifting clothes multiple times before I wash them. I find that because I'm healthy, that the smell of my sweat actually has a calming effect on me. But if a person's unhealthy and you smell their sweat, it usually like smelling a chemical. It's not calming. It's more an irritant. We have to look at the taste. If you taste your sweat, normally you're going to have a little bit of a salty taste to your sweat because we excrete salt as part of our sweating process. If it's too salty, that indicates that you're dehydrated or you're eating too much salt. If it's sweet, now I got a surprise for you. If you taste any sweetness in your sweat, it almost always means you're likely to have a fungal infection or a parasite infection. And in my experience, people whose sweat is sweet, they're over-consuming sugars, usually processed sugars, but often just too much carbohydrate. Typically, though, it's not the carbohydrate of real food. It's the carbohydrate of packaged sports bars, candy, the kind of stuff that makes everybody's body stressed. And it usually implies that your blood sugar is too high and you're not processing the sugar, so the body's excreting sugars through the skin, which makes you very, very attractive to not only parasites and funguses, but mosquitoes as well. So if you like getting bit by mosquitoes, just keep your sweat sweet. Okay? Color. Color does not apply to sweat, it applies to urine thickness. If your sweat is thick, it's usually going to be salty. That's my experience, and it usually means you're dehydrated. You should sweat fairly easily as well. If you find that you're exercising and you're not sweating, there could be a number of physiological challenges going on there, but typically people that exercise and don't sweat are dehydrated. That's a very, very common thing. I've seen that a lot. Ease of passage and frequency, they relate to urination, so we'll talk about that next. So now that you've got some basics on your sweat and you're paying attention to it, if your sweat smells bad, it's the most common cause of bad smelling sweat that I see is eating too much concentrated foods, packaged foods. Particularly the one thing that will make your sweat smell faster than anything is commercially raised animal flesh. If a person's eating more animal flesh or fish, anything with eyeballs in their body can effectively break down, it produces uric acid, which can make joints achy. It makes your sweat stink. You can develop high levels of what's called urinary indican, which is a byproduct of incomplete protein digestion, and that's often tested for by functional medicine practitioners as a means of determining A, are you digesting protein properly, B, are you stressing your liver, and things like that. So smelly sweat can be dietary imbalances, but it can also be toxins in the body. So if you're in an environmental area or you're, like I travel a lot, so oftentimes if I have to go to places like London and you get out of the subway and you blow your nose and it's black, if you monitor your sweat when you're in environments like that, you'll notice that your sweat tends to get more smelly because remember, your sweat is an agent of detoxification. Your skin and your sweating system, your thermoregulatory system, as far as sweating goes, are actually part of your mechanism of detoxifying your body. So if it's out of characteristic for you, look for something that's in your environment. If you have also got strong smelling sweat and that's out of characteristic, look for things like garlic in your diet. Some herbs can make your sweat smell quite strong, for example, garlic. Okay? Next is urine. So the smell of the urine is important. Urine should not have a strong smell. A healthy body, the urine should have a very faint smell. Often you don't even smell your pee if you're adequately hydrated and eating well. But typically the more concentrated the smell of the sweat, the urine is, the more toxic your body is or the more dehydrated you are. Hydration affects urination as well. So just like we tested your hydration level in relationship to sweat, any type of problem with the sweat or the urine as I'm describing, also you got to go right back to hydration and all the issues of hydration. And there's a lot in my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, on the right types of water, qualities of water, etc. So if your urine smells strong, think toxicity, dehydration, and also what have I eaten lately. If the urine, typically urine's not likely to give you a salty taste, but if urine tastes sweet, now I know people are thinking, oh my God, who would taste their urine? Well, actually, it's a very, very ancient medical technique to taste urine. And tasting your urine won't kill you. It might make you smarter. Literally, if you just put a finger in it and taste it, if you pick up a sweet taste, it is an indicator that you're not able to regulate blood must be rented lips, blood sugar properly. And is a symptom that is looked at in people that are potentially pre-diabetic or syndrome X, which means, again, you're not managing blood sugar well and are stressing your pancreas quite heavily. Color, if the urine is anything other than a clear to just mild yellow, typically it's going to get thicker and thicker and darker. So when you see urine getting darker and darker, it almost always means more and more toxins are accumulating in the body. And also, if you go with thick urine for any length of time, it often indicates that you're getting a backup or a buildup in your body. And I found people that have chronically thick urine also are more likely to have problems with kidney stones. So if you look at my blog on cider vinegar, using cider vinegar helps dissolve kidney stones and prevent them. The thickness, I think I covered thickness. So thickness means dehydration and concentration. Ease of passage. Urine should be easy to pass. Men typically are the most likely to have a hard time passing urine. As a man ages, he's more susceptible to fungal infections in the prostate. It can happen at any age, but people that are not aware that they're eating too much sugars or are eating too much processed food, very, very commonly men get fungal infections, and that leads to the inability to move urine effectively, so you can stand there waiting to pee, or you can feel like you need to pee but nothing comes out. Those are problems of ease of passage, and those are classic indicators of a fungal infection, and you need to look at my Healing Fungal and Parasite, Healing Fungal and Parasite Infections, the Absolute Essentials, and I go into all sorts of things that could be relevant to you there. Frequency, ideally I find a person's likely to need to pee once about every 2 hours. So oftentimes people will pee twice between meals if they're on a regular schedule. Each of us should have a sense of our own natural urination frequency. The range in bladder sizes and what we call nervousness of the bladder can vary. So a person could have a large enough bladder but have a nervous bladder and pee quite a bit, which would be an expression of their personality. In general, though, once every 2 hours, healthy urination. Most people's bladders can hold up between 1 and 2 cups of fluid. And if you're peeing more than that, as I show in my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, it's very likely to be caused by water hardness or softness, typically soft water, which means it's got the minerals that are related to softness cut down, so the water has different effects on your skin and your clothes and washing machines and stuff like that, and decreases the likelihood of buildup in pipes, but may not be ideal for your body. If there's too much minerals in the water, that may have a slowing down effect on you. I doubt it. If you're not getting enough minerals in the water, then you're going to see an increase in urinary frequency. And that can disrupt the mineral balance in your body. For example, drinking distilled water was popular for a long time, but due to reasons of leaching minerals out of the body, it's been found not to be an ideal practice and should be used as a therapeutic application only. So typically, if you're peeing too much, it means you don't have enough mineral content in your water, okay, which is related to hardness. So now we go to feces. In my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, I have a comprehensive section on how to analyze your bowel movements. I show you what it looks like if you're constipated, dehydrated, if there's irritation of the intestinal tract. There's a variety of options in there. I don't have time in one little short blog to go through all that, but it's very well depicted with pictures in cartoon form that kids seem to really love. But look into the issues of feces, because remember, feces itself is 70% water. So any of the changes to do with water that we've talked about in hydration almost always show up as changes in your bowel movements. And usually if you're noticing changes in your bowel movements for the worse, it often indicates that you need to look carefully at hydration. When we come to saliva, we're looking at breath. One, you can test your own breath. If your body's healthy, your breath should not be foul. Breath can be related to internal organ health, but it can also be related to oral hygiene. So if you take your finger and stick it on the back of your tongue and smell it, I don't smell anything. You can rub it up on the roof of your mouth or in behind your molars, but usually on the back of the tongue, and then smell it. That gives you a pretty good indication. If you do feel that your body's in good shape overall and you're living well, but you have bad breath, check your oral hygiene, how often you're flossing your teeth. You might want to get a tongue scraper. You may want to use some cider vinegar and a little salt as a mouthwash just to freshen your oral cavity up. When it comes to saliva, though, one of the most common complaints out there is dry mouth. Whenever we're sympathetically overexcited, or we're in a state that would be stressful to the adrenal glands if prolonged, when the sympathetic system dominates the parasympathetic system, the mouth tends to become dry. So a chronically dry mouth is usually a chronically overstimulated body, or an overly stressed body. So the key thing about saliva is, how does it smell? If it smells foul, like bad breath, it means look into it and find out what's doing that. And if you do not have adequate saliva and you suffer from dry mouth, it almost always is an indication of dehydration or an imbalance in your diet with regard to yin foods and yang foods, which I can't go into too deeply here. If you have issues with the eyes, if the eyes are dry, chronically dry and itchy, that can be, again, overstimulation of the sympathetic nervous system, too much stress, dehydration, but it can also be a fungal or a parasite infection, and it can also be airborne allergens that do that. When people have fungal and parasite infections, they get an increase usually in excretions of fluids wherever there's a mucous membrane. Whenever you have fungal and parasite infections and high stress levels such as adrenal fatigue, what the research shows is that the immunoglobulin A that lines all the regions with mucous membranes decreases with chronic stress, opening you up to problems with mucous membranes, such as inside your nose, inside the oral cavity, the eyes, vaginas, rectums, and even potentially inside the penis. It's not a mucous membrane in there, but it can get irritated from too many pathogens in the body due to chronic stress. Earwax. If you have excessive earwax, even though we wouldn't really call earwax a fluid, I put it in here just for completeness because it's a good thing to talk about right now. Earwax is basically part of the immune system's means of protecting the ear canal from things like bugs and organisms getting inside the tissues of your ear or in your ear. It is a quite common symptom with parasite infections that people have increased earwax production, which could be a global or a local reaction. In other words, I lift rocks, for example, that are often dirty and have little organisms, and sometimes I get bit all over my body, and that kind of dirt can get inside my ear passage, and those organisms can irritate the ear and start causing excess earwax production. So if you're getting earwax production in excess, one, get my Healing Fungal and Parasites DVDs and make sure you don't have a fungal or parasite infection, particularly a parasite in this case. Two, you may need to get your ears professionally cleaned or get some ear candles. And I've seen some pretty radical stuff come out of not only people's ears, but my own ears. The first time I used earwax candles, it was like a museum of fossils in there, and I was just absolutely shocked that that's been riding around in my ear for so many years, which could be from surfing and, you know, racing motorcycles and all sorts of stuff that gets in there. So monitor your earwax based on those criteria. Vaginal fluids, well, there's whole books written on that. So here's a great book that all women, whether they're on birth control or not, should study to understand the changes in their own vaginal fluids. I'm quite amazed as a therapist at how many females are completely unaware of how their own body works, which as a woman is a very dangerous idea, because women's bodies are far more sensitive to diet and lifestyle changes than a man's body, due to the fact that they have to have the resources to carry two lives. So in this book, The Pill, Are You Sure It's For You by Jane Bennett and Alexandra Pope, very good comprehensive section on vaginal fluids and how they relate to natural birth control, which has been shown to be as effective, if not more effective, than the pill, with none of the negative side effects, and I encourage that for people. Typically when you see problems in vaginal fluids of any significance, it's likely to be related to a fungal infection. Certainly there's other things, but vaginal yeast infections are very, very common, particularly in women that are stressed or inadequately nourished or whose lifestyles are out of balance, and it weakens their body and makes them susceptible to vaginal yeast infections. But a woman's vaginal fluids, like any other fluids in the body, should not be foul-smelling, and they should look and feel healthy. It is not unusual for a woman to taste her own vaginal secretions to determine for herself whether or not they're healthy, but many people think that that's foul and dirty. I always laugh at that because they don't mind if some guy goes down there or some lover tastes it, but they don't want to do it themselves. So it's time to grow up if you're one of those people and start taking care of yourself. It's yours. Certainly I could say more on that topic, but it's not really my intention to give a lesson on gynecology here. I would say that changes in vaginal secretions are highly linked to hormonal stability in a female. So where you have negative vaginal secretion changes, you should look at hormonal function, which is usually a symptom of diet and lifestyle. So then we go back to 4 doctors. So you can see I put monitoring body fluids for health, 4 meaning Dr. Happiness, what is your dream, and what are the values you use to support the dream. Dr. Diet, how are you eating? Dr. Movement, are you getting adequate movement of the right type for your personal needs? And Dr. Quiet, if you're overstressed and inadequately rest, all your body fluids are likely to show symptoms of that stress. So I want to close by emphasizing a this for that approach, even to this, doesn't work. In other words, if your sweat is salty and smells bad and you fail the hydration test, you could simply say, oh, well, it's all due to dehydration. But the reality of it is, why have you not been drinking water? And where could you look at your own values or your self-management tactics to improve the quality of or the frequency of the water that you drink so you don't run into these problems? So almost all the things I see, with rare exceptions, all boil down to self-management problems, not understanding how to take care of a body and or lacking the willingness to do it, which usually means you don't have a dream bigger than your crisis, so your nightmare becomes your dream, and these are the side effects often of either ignorance or simply not having a reason to live. So I hope you enjoyed my little session on body fluids today. Look forward to sharing something with you soon. Have a great day. Feel free to go to the Chek Institute website, look into what it takes to become an HLC1 practitioner, and let me, one of my instructors, teach you how to do this in a much more focused, concentrated, systematic way. I hope you're learning little bits you can use from these blogs by all means, but getting trained properly, there's nothing like it. There's, fast food education can only take you so far, and I'm sure if you're enjoying applying the tips I'm sharing with you on these blogs and getting results, that you'll be absolutely amazed at what happens when you get properly trained. So I'll look forward to seeing you at HLC1 soon.